All right, everybody. Here we are going to start lesson 9. Lesson 9, we dive deeper into mosquitoes and the experiment that helped the scientists understand more about their involvement with yellow fever. So, we're going to think about some of the stuff that we've read about how mosquitoes, well, Dr. Lazier's experiment from Dr. Finlay's theory, and we're going to think about how Dr. Reed's team metaphorically calls yellow fever a monster. They're in Cuba, and this disease is so deadly and spread so easily, it just seems like something that can't be stopped. However, they discover that, or at least they're trying to test the idea that there's something so common, mosquitoes, in a subtropical, equatorial country, which are very, very, very common there, are maybe the cause of this deadly disease. So, how do you stop something that is so deadly yet is caused by something so common? So, we thought about how you would or would not allow an infected mosquito to possibly bite you as a volunteer. But as you read along with this text, you're going to think of or remind yourself of the patient description of yellow fever from the very first chapter we read in chapter 1. And you're going to reread how the scientists were thinking about these volunteers choosing to be in their experiments back in chapter 6. So, if mosquitoes did carry the disease germs, a human volunteer bitten by an infected bug could get yellow fever and die of the disease. That was the risk. But all 3 doctors were prepared to face it. To fight the illness, they were ready to take what Dr. Carroll later called a soldier's chances. So you're going to reread this section. It's only about a minute long to remind yourself of these symptoms. How did people feel if they got yellow fever? And they took a soldier's chance with this experiment. Why were the doctors ready to take a soldier's chance? Well, start by defining what you think or how you understand a soldier's chance to be and mean. What does it mean? What do soldiers do? What kind of actions are they involved in? And describe maybe their level of safety or lack thereof to really understand what a soldier's chance is. Would you volunteer to be in this experiment? And then go to card 2. So we are going to think through the idea of motivation for a character, which is why characters do what they do. Their beliefs, their values. What are the things that make them do what they do? So what motivates Dr. Reed to go to Cuba? A few things. He dreamed of being able to do something big, something he hoped that would alleviate human suffering, and he hoped to make a major contribution while he did his research. So he hoped, he dreamed, and hoped. And if we synthesize these 3 quotes about Dr. Reed, he wanted to do something big to help people and make a contribution with his work. It sounds like maybe the reason he became a doctor and started doing this kind of research is to really make an impact on the world and take pain and suffering away from people who were dealing with something that maybe he thought was unnecessary or could be solved. So that's the same thing. So a character's motivation is the reason behind their specific actions or decisions, why a character does certain things. That could be their emotions, something from their personality, maybe goals. So you're going to think about this in one of two groups: Dr. Reed's motivation or Dr. Carroll's motivation. You were assigned either a 1 or a 2, and Mr. O'Connor by Mr. O'Connor as class started. So if you were a 1 and you have that written down, then you are Dr. Lazier's motivation. If you are a 2, you're Dr. Carroll's motivation. So Dr. Lazier's group, which makes you group 1, you're going to jump over to activity 3, and you're going to do the same thing. If you're in Dr. Carroll's group, you're going to go to activity 4. Make sure you feel like you understand this motivational information about Dr. Reed so that you can transfer the ability to synthesize and understand character motivation to either Dr. Lazier or Dr. Reed. So we're analyzing details from this text to better understand why Dr. Lazier would place an infected mosquito on Dr. Carroll's arm. So a few things to think about. Dr. Lazier is leading this experiment, and what makes him let the mosquito bite Dr. Carroll? So we've got this 7-minute passage. Make sure you read it. I have no such thing. Let's think about these things while we read. How strongly does Dr. Lazier believe in this mosquito theory? Make sure you highlight some evidence that tells you whether he's really behind it or if he's doing it just because he's trying to get people to stop talking about it, move on to something else. How does he believe the bite will lead to yellow fever? What other reasons does Dr. Lazier have for letting this happen? Is there a personality trait or goal that influences his actions? So make sure you highlight each one of these and then select a detail, as we've done before, from paragraphs 10 to 12 that introduces reasons why Dr. Lazier would choose to place an infected mosquito on his arm. So which one of those A, B, C, D details shows that this is Dr. Lazier's motivation for letting the mosquito bite Dr. Carroll? Card 2. In the first column, your detail, you're going to copy and paste 2 details about Dr. Lazier's behavior, right here and right here. 2 details about his behavior, and this is, again, trying to get at his motivations. So in the second column, you're going to explain what that detail means. So whatever you wrote here, this is your explanation of what that character motivation means. And here are some things to think about. Is he supporting the mission? Does he care about the experiment? Does he expect the bite to actually lead to an infection? Is there something else? So your evidence, your explanation, and then in the third column, tell us what that reveals about his character, who he is as a person. So his evidence, what he does, why does he do that, and what does it show about him that he allowed that to happen or chose to have that happen? If you need to add more rows, you can. If you are just finding tons and tons of evidence, add as many rows as you need, but make sure you're finishing in the appropriate amount of time. Card 3. Based on the evidence you collected, try to figure out what your evidence points you to as far as Dr. Lazier's main or key motivation for letting the mosquito bite Dr. Carroll. Now, only if you pick other do you need to put a response here, all right? It's only one of those 4. If you pick other, then you explain your response, hand it in. All right, everybody. If you were assigned Dr. Carroll, then this is going to be what you're doing next. So we are diving into the motivations behind these characters. Dr. Carroll agrees to let this mosquito bite him. Why does he do it? What is his motivation for doing it? How strongly does Dr. Carroll believe in this theory? This is what you're looking for as you read. So highlight evidence of all three of these things. 3 minutes. Does he believe that the bite will lead to yellow fever? That's Dr. Carroll. And are there other reasons that Dr. Carroll might let this happen? Is there a personality trait or something he's trying to accomplish, a goal that influences his actions and decisions? So read that, highlight evidence for each one of those, and then come down here and pick the evidence from paragraphs 10 to 12 of chapter 7 that shows why Dr. Carroll would let Dr. Lazier do this to him, right? Why is Dr. Carroll saying, yeah, sure, a mosquito can bite me? Which one of those shows the right evidence? And then find another detail from the book about why Dr. Carroll would let it bite him. Copy and paste it and include the citation, just like we've been practicing. Card 2. Here, you're going to find some evidence about Dr. Carroll and his behavior to understand his motivations. So you need at least 2 details from the passage about his behavior. You're going to copy and paste those right here and here. Then you're going to explain the why of those details. So you put something about what Dr. Carroll did right here, and you explain why does Dr. Carroll let the mosquito bite him, and then your inference about Dr. Carroll. What does it mean that he did this action, right? What does it tell you about his motivations? What is he trying to accomplish? Who is he as a person, meaning his character traits, that kind of stuff. You can add more rows. You can also think about these. Does he want to support the team? Does he care about the mosquito experiment? Does he not expect that the bite will actually lead to an infection, so he's not worried about it? Think about those things too. That can help explain maybe why he's doing what he's doing. Card 3. Based on your evidence, what does it point you to? Which one of these is the best reason that you think Dr. Carroll's motivation, or that shows Dr. Carroll's motivation? If it's other, pick other, and then explain in your own words what is the reason for Dr. Carroll's motivation. What is he trying to get to? And hand it in. Here, we are going to post in Padlet and then share out loud. Actually, just listen to Mr. O'Connor's instructions for this discussion. All right. Here is our writing prompt for today. Now that you have completed this deep dive into the motivations behind Dr. Carroll and Dr. Lazier's choices, you're going to use that evidence to come to some sort of conclusion with Dr. Lazier or Dr. Carroll might have acted differently if they had known that the mosquito that bit them or bit Dr. Carroll would eventually lead to Dr. Carroll's yellow fever infection. So, do you think that Dr. Carroll wanted to help prove the mosquito theory or not? Do you think Dr. Carroll was genuinely surprised that he caught yellow fever? Was he actually surprised? Do you think Dr. Lazier had been waiting for a while to be allowed to research the mosquitoes? Is that something he had been wanting to do for a while? Is there evidence for that? Do you think that Dr. Lazier was frustrated that the mosquito experiments were not going as well as he hoped? And do you remember how intently all the team members listened to Dr. Reed as he described their mission? There's some things to think about as you write your answer and your claim that's going to respond to the prompt is one of these two. So you get to pick either 1 or 2. Don't do both. You're going to pick 2 details from the text to respond. If he had known the results, would Dr. Lazier have allowed the mosquito to bite Dr. Carroll? So it's either yes, Dr. Lazier would have allowed him to bite Dr. Carroll if he knew what the results were going to be, or no, he wouldn't. And then your evidence. If he had known the results, would Dr. Carroll have let the mosquito bite him? So what are the characters' motivations, and would it have changed their motivation if they knew what the result was going to be? Make sure you hand that in. Hop on over to the exit ticket and go ahead and answer. Is it true or false? A, B, C, or D? True or false? A, B, C, or D. So you're looking for evidence to support your true or false claim. Be very careful and closely read.